Good morning. What a very full room. Thank you very much for making space for everybody at your table. And welcome to the inaugural Dyslexia and Dyscalculia Conference, Isle of Wight 2024. Yay! My name is Sue McKenna from Hampshire Dyslexia Association, and for years we've tried to make a difference in the Isle of Wight. So today we're very grateful to Jo for her amazing entrepreneurship to get us all here today. A couple of pieces of housekeeping. Fire exit is here, straight onto the lawn. We're not expecting a fire drill. The toilets are out of the door left or right, and you have the yellow sheet in front of you which gives you the Wi-Fi code and the plan of the day. I'd like to welcome Linda and Ian Williams, who are responsible for today, who are Jo's parents.
No pressure, thanks!
And we're really, really honoured to welcome Dr. Helen Ross, Louise Selby and Rob Jennings as our keynote speakers. But most especially I'd like to thank you all for getting up at whatever time it was this morning, for organising your day and your children and your school timetable, and for us coming from, my husband and I live in Poole, so we had a lovely sailing yesterday. But thank you all for coming today, and I hope you have a lovely day. We're very grateful to Aaron and Lucy from SEN Books. There's loads of books down the corridor, which you'll be able to see in break time. To Scott from Lily Lamps, and Sam Crabtree has travelled 8 hours from Morecambe. So this morning he wasn't able to cockle, so he's come all the way from Morecambe, and he is from IDL, and we've got some goodie bags for you, which we'll pass out during the day.
And Jamie Wace has just arrived.
And Jamie Wace is in the building.
He's in the building.
So I'd like to hand you over now to Jo, and I hope you have a really lovely day. I've got a badge, Hampshire Dyslexia. You'll see there are 5 of our trustees here today. Please talk to us if we could be of any help. Thank you.
Hi guys, I can't believe it, I made it happen. You're all here, and I'm very excited. I'm really not going to take up very much of your time because I want to hand over to the incredible speakers and the day that we've got planned for you. But I just want to set the tone of the day, and I want to talk about why raising awareness and building understanding of learning differences is important, not just to me, but to all of you in here. So I do know that some of you know who I am, but some of you don't. So very quickly, who is she? Well, I am Jo Rees, and I am a trained primary school teacher. I was a Senko. I'm a mum to 3 children that have dyslexic profiles. I'm a specialist dyslexia teacher and assessor. I was an LA consultant for a short time. I'm founder of Another Way Round Dyslexia Support and Dyslexic Life with Jo Rees. I'm an author of 2 self-published books. I'm a podcast host at Dyslexic Life with Jo Rees, the podcast that aims to normalise dyslexia in everyday life. And I'm a social media content creator and influencer for dyslexia. I still feel sick when I say that, Rosie. But anyway, that's what I am, that's what I do. So, why am I passionate about raising awareness of dyslexia? I've been passionate for about 15 years now, if I'm honest, and it's no coincidence that that coincided with when I did my specialist teacher training. I'd been a primary school teacher for 6 or 7 years. I was really good with children with SEN. My children in my class made really good progress. I know that because I was asked to be a Senko after 2 years of teaching. And if I'm really honest, I went off to that specialist dyslexia training. So I'd left being a Senko, the local authority, I'd been appointed to be a specialist teacher we had 4 outreach provisions on the Isle of Wight many years ago. one in each area, and children came to us from schools. We were responsible for a cluster, and children came to us for outreach, and I was lucky enough to have got one of those jobs. And part of that was I had to do the specialist dyslexia training. If I'm really honest, when I went off to that training, wasn't really sure what they were going to teach me in a year. Like, surely, what else was there to know about dyslexia? I wasn't arrogant, I was ignorant, because ignorance is bliss. And the thing is, we don't know what we don't know. And my eyes, so the way that course worked, it was an online course, but we had a 4-day residential. And I went off to that residential and realised really quickly that I probably was dyslexic. But I suddenly realised, had this kind of awful feeling for all these children that I had failed, all these children that I hadn't identified, all these children that I hadn't picked up, because I didn't know what I was looking for. You know, it was things like, the curriculum just isn't set up to teach children with dyslexia to read and spell. You know, phonics doesn't work for so many children. It is a completely different way of teaching. And the trouble is, when you know something, you can't unknow it. It changes you for good. So when you know what children need and you can't deliver that, it's really frustrating. So there was a bit of a problem. I was working for the local authority in my outreach provision, so that was totally fine because I was in my little bubble working one-to-one with my just 10 children. That was all, 10 children I had, 2.5 days a week from 15 schools. I mean, when I look at it now, it was a ridiculous service because it wasn't meeting the needs of anywhere near enough children. I knew I had undiagnosed dyslexia and I was grappling with that. It took me a lot to get my head around it. I didn't get a diagnosis straight away. It didn't feel important. The reason why it didn't feel important was because my son had started school and my son was struggling. Now this picture here, it's a bit dark, but that was the day that Jemima came home from hospital, and I think I felt a bit like Enid did there with my scratching her head. But actually I did the level 5 with Billy when he was 3 and Enid when she was 1, and I did the level 7 dyslexia assessor when I was pregnant with Jemima, had a month off, and then I finished it when she was 6 months old. And Bill was at school and he was really struggling. Now, it was really difficult because I knew what he needed. I also knew that the school were doing the absolute best they could with the knowledge and the resources that they had. But they were actually making his dyslexia worse because he was spending large amounts of time outside the classroom telling a teaching assistant what he wanted to write, and he was copying it down. Work was differentiated in terms of spellings, and we are talking sort of 15 years ago. But his needs were just not being met. I couldn't blame the school, it wasn't their fault. They didn't know what I knew. And actually I wasn't massively worried about him, he was little, and actually I had the skills to be able to help him. But then I was made redundant. So the local authority got rid of all 4 dyslexia provisions. And actually, I was tired, I'd done my training, Jemima was only a year old when I was made redundant. I literally came back from maternity leave, had bust a gut to get all of these qualifications and was made redundant. The local authority were going to keep 1 specialist teacher full-time to cover the whole of the Isle of Wight. And we could apply for that job if we wanted to, but funnily enough, none of us applied for it because we knew what we knew that we weren't going to be able to do a good job. It was going to be such a watered down service, it was almost pointless. So I was made redundant. So what I tried to do versus the reality. So I approached 3 head teachers. So I don't know if you can tell by the fact that this room is quite full. I've got quite a good network of people. So I approached 3 teachers, 3 head teachers in my local area, and I said to them, look, you know me, I've worked for you in the past. How about you employ me a day and a half a week between the 3 of you, and I will come and do the specialist dyslexic stuff. You know, I know it's not the whole of the island, but it's 3 schools and I know I can deliver it well. They all came back, they all said yes. And 1 school wanted me to Senko half a day a week as well, so I actually potentially had 2 days a week. I had to apply for that job, it was advertised, but I applied for it and had an interview and got it. But the trouble was, it didn't last very long. Because again, ignorance is bliss. And unfortunately, nobody really understood what I was trying to do. And I can remember going into one school about 4 weeks into the job, and a teacher was off sick, and they said, Jo, any chance we can't get a supply teacher, any chance you can teach that class this morning? Of course I can, not a problem. But if I'm doing that, I'm not supporting the dyslexic children in the class. And so it went on. And very quickly, it just became apparent that it wasn't going to work. And I ended up Senkoing at just one school, which I did for about 6 years. So I want to talk about the Senko role now, because lots of you in here are Senkos. Put your hand up if you're a Senko. Woohoo! The greatest respect for you, right? Because Senko is a bit of a shitty job, actually, at times. Like, let's be honest, right? Because you often have a teaching commitment. You're often in the role because you're passionate about supporting children with SEN and you want to make a difference. There's no extra training to become a Senko. You do the NASEN accreditation, but actually that doesn't teach you about special educational needs. That teaches you about data and budget. Like, it doesn't teach you how to support children. So actually, being a Senko is a tricky, tricky job because you're constantly negotiating. You're negotiating with teachers because you can see that that kid's not being met, so you're trying to change that teacher's teaching style. You're negotiating with parents because you know that you're not giving that kid what they need, but actually those are the only resources you've got, so you're doing the best you can with what you've got. You're negotiating often with senior leadership team because so many Senkos are not on senior leadership team. You manage a budget that you're not actually in control of. So huge kudos to you that are Senko. So I battled with it for 7 years, and then one day I just snapped. I just thought, I cannot do this anymore. My mental health wasn't great, and I wasn't keeping anybody happy. So I resigned. So I do need to talk about the resignation dress, because this is the day I resigned from job number 1, and I was wearing that dress. And I knew that I wanted to set up independently, but the time wasn't quite right still. So I managed to get a job at another local primary school as an intervention teacher part-time. Well, I lasted 2 weeks before I resigned again in the same dress. But it just became, the trouble was I was an intervention teacher, great, but I was delivering what the teachers wanted me to deliver. They didn't know what I knew, and they're telling me I need to be doing phase 5 phonics, and I'm thinking, goodness me, this kid can't sequence the alphabet. They don't know what the vowels are. What's the point of doing phase 5 phonics? So I was just too frustrated. I did have to see the term out. But in August 2015, I resigned. And in January 2015, I set up another way round. The other reason why I grappled for so long was because I really didn't want to be independent. Because like all of you, I went into teaching because I want to make a difference, and I wanted to make a difference to every child, not just the lucky ones, not just the ones that could afford it. So I really grappled with being independent, but it became apparent that there was a real need for it and that parents were actually willing to pay for it. So when I set up, I knew the growth of the company was going to be tricky, because I just come from school and I know that schools have a super limited budget. So my work was not going to come from you. I love you all, but I just know realistically it wasn't going to come from you. But being the queen of another way round, see what I did there, I was able to support parents. So I was providing free parent support groups, face-to-face at the time, because it was before COVID. I was doing so much tuition. I was doing small group as well as one-to-one. And I was doing assessment as well. I was working all day Saturday, mostly all day Sunday as well, because obviously kids are at school most of the time. And at the end of the day, you can't do an assessment after they've been at school. So it was a tricky couple of years. And the truth was, at this time, I still wasn't managing my own dyslexia very well or believing in myself. So to lots of people, I looked like I was really successful, but I hadn't really got my head around what it meant to be dyslexic, all those missed opportunities, how different would my life have been had it been identified. But, we keep going and we all do what we can, don't we? And COVID hit. And COVID was quite well timed for me, actually, because it gave me time to kind of stop and reflect. Now, we weren't able to assess initially remotely online. My main income at the time was assessments. I wasn't doing any teaching. I had to earn a certain amount of money to pay our mortgage. So I had to be creative. I had to put my big girl pants on and tackle technology and learn how to use Zoom. And I taught specialist lessons online, and I actually supported 121 children in that first lockdown. I would get up and start teaching at 8:30 and finish at about 5 o'clock, literally back to back, back to back. I wasn't doing general tuition, I was doing specialist dyslexic tuition. And it was incredible because the kids weren't tired. We were able to make a real difference. At the same time, there was a social media explosion because everybody was online. And being the queen of another way round, dyslexic life was Jo Rees was born, so I kind of really upped my game in terms of social media. This enabled me to have a much bigger impact. So Sue connected with me from Hampshire Dyslexic Association, and then one day I had this TikTok post that went viral. And this little message landed in my DMs, and he's smiling because he knows who it is, and it was Aaron Smith, and Aaron Smith is here today. And Aaron is the founder of the Dyslexia Show, and this message appeared in my inbox, and I just couldn't believe it. Jo, I love your content. Any chance you will be one of our speakers at the Dyslexia Show? And I can remember saying to Tom, oh my goodness, I can't believe this is happening to me. And when we had a phone conversation, it was so funny because I was totally awestruck. I got off the phone and did a TikTok and said, you're never going to believe this. I've been invited to speak at the Dyslexia Show. I've just spoken to Aaron Smith. And Aaron Smith did exactly the same. He did a TikTok video saying, oh my goodness, you're never going to believe it. Jo Rees is coming to the Dyslexia Show. It was a hilarious moment. But I did the second ever Dyslexia Show, which was last year, and I talked again this year, and I did have 2 sold-out talks, didn't I, Aaron? Now, this is me at the first Dyslexia Show, and this photo credit is Courtney Driver. And she is one of my first and most inspirational students, and I've got permission to share her story today. So I started working with Courtney when I first set up the company, and it was all a bit accidental. She'd been told that it was very unlikely that she was going to pass her maths and English GCSE. And unless she got a tutor, she was in a school that really didn't understand her dyslexia. It really wasn't being managed well, and it was a chance conversation. Her brother happened to be in the same school as my son at the time, and it was a chance conversation in the playground where I basically struck up a relationship with the parent and was like, actually, I think I can help you with this. And we did an assessment, and I did some tuition with Courtney. Now, Courtney was in year 10. We didn't do GCSE coursework. We did specialist dyslexic stuff. We sequenced the alphabet. We worked on looking at how words were built up. We did all of that stuff. And I'm very proud to say that Courtney passed her GCSEs. Courtney got a triple distinction for her A-level equivalent and got a first-class honours for her teaching degree, and she's sat over there today. Now, I don't take credit for Courtney because Courtney did that all herself. She is massively, massively driven. But what I do take credit for is being the right person at the right time with the right knowledge and the right intervention. Anybody can do that. I'm not the only person that can do that. But I think that story just shows when you get the right person and the right support, you can make such a huge difference. So social media also allowed me to make contact with the incredible speakers that are here today. I have had to be brave and join LinkedIn, but yeah. So social media made a massive difference for me. The thing is, we're still not really any further forward, in as much as budgets still impact your training. I'm always super grateful when I get an email asking me to come in and do a little bit of training. I do reports where I can, do a lot of independent reports, but I appreciate you often don't have the interventions to deliver the recommendations. I do what I can where I can, and I know it's not a blame game. Everybody is doing the best they can with what they've got. And at the end of the day, ignorance is bliss. You don't know what you don't know. And if you don't know what I know, that's why you can't put, and you're not pushing to put those interventions in. I give what I can for free, but I need to earn a living too. And then I quite often get emails from Senkos. And I'm just going to give you a little insight into my head now. And I am timekeeper, I am nearly at the end, so don't panic. So one day, back in April, across the same week, I had a couple of emails from Senkos asking me about Morph Mastery. I had a couple more emails asking me about what dyslexic screening tool they should buy. I also delivered dyscalculia training across 3 primary schools. And I did assessments for 3 children really close together, children that were severely dyslexic who had slipped through the net. They should never have got to that stage. So my little cogs started whirring. What if I got Louise to come and talk about Morph Mastery and Rob to talk about dyscalculia, and Dr. Helen Ross to come and talk about the importance of early identification and the new dyslexia definition, and Jamie to come and talk about Talamo. Oh, what a fire of a cracker day that would be. So I emailed all 3 of them, and they all emailed back literally within half an hour and went, yep, we're there. The same time, I emailed Sue and Frank from Hampshire Dyslexic Association and said, will you support me with this? They said, get some costs, get a venue, and we will. So that's what I did straight away. So I pitched it to Frank and to Sue, my wonderful idea, and they said yes. And then, by fate, all 3 speakers were free on exactly the same day, which was November the 13th, today. But then the doubt kicked in, because there are always people that want to bring you down, and people were saying nobody will come, there's no budget, like it's not important enough, there's more important things, there's school closures happening. And I ummed and ahed about not going ahead with it. I did have a conversation with Sue where I was like, I'm not sure if the time is right. And we decided that there's never a right time, actually. And we were prepared to risk it. And we were prepared to risk it because we had to try for the hundreds of children in our classrooms that have failed every day, that are not identified and supported. Nobody's fault, but nobody knows what they need. And so here we are today at the sold-out Dyslexia and Dyscalculia conference, making history. Give yourselves a round of applause. So, who is this conference for? This conference is for the 892 people I have assessed in the last 10 years. And it's for the thousands of people we are going to assess or support and identify in the future. Because one woman really can only take it so far. But it's also for my dad, because I couldn't change his dyslexic narrative. I could change Billy's, I could change Courtney's, I could change other people's, I could change my own, but it was a little bit too late for my dad. And we all have a responsibility to change that narrative for children with learning differences. It's got to stop being just the lucky ones, just the parents that can afford the assessment, just the Senko that happens to have done the extra course and knows a bit more information. We all have a responsibility, and it's got to stop just being the lucky ones that get supported and identified. Because at least 1 in 5, roughly 20% of an average class are going to have a learning difference of some kind. And together, we have to find a better way. And actually, that way has already started. Welcome to the Isle of Wight Dyslexia and Dyscalculia Conference 2024. Let's do this. And I also just want to make one very quick announcement afterwards. Incredibly, Chris, who's just actually was making his way to the front, and Chris and Blake from the White House Media, I've managed to get a videographer, and they're actually recording all of the talks today. And anybody that's attending, you're going to be sent the talks so that you can disseminate this training back into your schools. Okay? So it goes on way past today. The ripple keeps on rippling. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Helen Ross. Thank you very much. Just have to give us a minute while we switch mics and stuff.